Undersheriff Bond just got back to me from the county, and he's pulled together some information for me about the Austin Oldfield case, and has also lined up an interview with Sheriff Brown. So I'm really excited. This is a big development because I'll be able to get a lot more details about what actually happened in those last few days there. And I'm going to go do a ride-along with Sheriff Brown here in just a few minutes and get some details. What in the report, or what were people saying that makes it sound like Austin was on drugs? How was he acting?
His behavior was just unpredictable, and almost as though he was hallucinating while he was talking about things that people shouldn't be seeing out in the woods, the friends in tree forts, and running away from an offer for help when he's in an area that he looked like he probably didn't know where he was, and he needed assistance, yet he ran from that. And then just his communication was just way off base of a normal person.
What do you know about his background? Why was he up there?
Well, he had left home. He wanted to come out to the Gifford Pin Show. He wanted to spend a couple of weeks in the forest. There was some information that he was loosely tied to the Rainbow family of Living Light. They were having a regional gathering in the forest, Skamania County, that time of year. His arrival coincided with the early arrival of some of those folks. But it was really just kind of from what we could gather, it was kind of a lifelong adventure for him to come out west and see the west and see Mount St. Helens and get into the forest and spend a couple of weeks. So that really seemed to be the impetus behind the trip.
Had he been, he had been to some of the rainbow festivals here in the Northwest before? Or?
I don't think we had any information that he'd actually attended, but he was tied in socially with some of the folks that were a part of that, and knew that the regional gathering was occurring. They knew he was coming out west, and the fact that he spent time talking with them, associating with them, and the fact that the group was here in the region during that time led us to believe that he had some loose connections.
Do you see a lot of people, or do you handle a lot of cases out here of people getting lost, and if so, why?
Historically, the county probably ranks in the top 5 throughout the state for search and rescue calls annually, and I would say probably 90% of those are on the forest, and 99% of them are from folks who don't live here. They're from out of the area. So yeah, I would say we deal with a large number every year on the Gifford Pin Show.
What are common mistakes that people make when they get lost?
A lot of it is not knowing the area, and so they come into an area and they don't generally know what the terrain is like. They may not be physically prepared for that adventure that they're on. They may not have the appropriate gear. They may not have planned it around the right window of weather. All of those factors can lead somebody to becoming A, lost, B, injured, C, disoriented, and especially in the heat of summer or the coldness of winter. If you don't have the right amount of sustenance, water and food, or the right type of clothing to withstand the elements, those kinds of things are going to get you in trouble. And a lot of that is what we deal with, and then we also find that people get in well beyond their physical limitations and find themselves injured and need assistance.
Does it look like Glenn was prepared to be out there? What was the weather like that time of year?
If it was very nice. It's much like it is this September. It's very warm temperatures during the day, cool at night. If Glenn had done nothing but stayed at his car and camped and taken short little hikes away from the car and back. And there's every indication that he had all of the things he needed to enjoy a couple of weeks on the forest. Unfortunately, all of the other factors surrounding this case seem to point to the fact that Glenn put himself in a position where he wasn't thinking coherently, and he took some actions that caused him to separate from his camp and lead us to a point where we don't know where he ended up.
Yeah. What are some of the essential gear that people should have when they're out exploring, in your opinion?
Well, obviously the comfort things are important, so the right clothing and the right footwear. But if you're going to spend the night out in the forest or anywhere, you have to make sure that you've got the right equipment to stay warm and fight off the temperatures, or know how to get yourself in and get back out. So navigation equipment is important. It used to be that people, maps and compasses were the thing, and nowadays with phones and GPS units, most people, I think, probably utilize technology to navigate with, but in the end, those things are only as good for as long as the battery lasts. And it's always good to carry a map and a compass and know how to use both of those to get yourself in and out in the event that your phone or GPS unit doesn't function anymore. So those are important. And cell phones are obviously a big thing these days. And most cell phones have the ability to use a compass, and they have GPS coordinates on them. In fact, a lot of the calls we have on Mount St. Helens anymore, if we can communicate with the individual who's lost by cell phone and get their coordinates from them, we can pull up a program on a map and pinpoint exactly where they're at and almost walk them out without ever responding.
What should somebody do if they find themselves lost?
Well, if you have a way to get a phone call to emergency services, you need to let somebody know that there's a problem. And we typically try and teach folks to stay in one location and not move. It's a lot easier to find somebody if they're not moving, which typically we would prefer to search at night, just because people will hold up at night, especially when they're in areas where they're not familiar with the terrain and don't know how to get around. If they'll hold still, we can move people in, and it's a lot easier to make contact with them that way. So, notify somebody. But probably of equal importance is if you're going to go out, you need to let somebody know where you're going, what your travel plans are, when you're coming back, how long you're going to be gone, how you can be reached if communications are possible. All of those things typically will lead to a more successful search effort if we have to initiate one.
What area was searched, and what was the story of what happened, the order?
So the first call that we had on this was on the 19th of September. That's during the middle of bow hunting season for elk. And at that time, we had this report of a hunter contacting a guy on the forest who seemed disoriented, and he offered him help, and he muttered off some weird stuff and ran back into the forest. We didn't even know Glenn was here then. We didn't know Glenn was missing then. And in fact, didn't find that out until I think the 2nd of October. So almost 2 weeks later, we get a call from his, I think, girlfriend, indicating that he's overdue. And we tied that call on the 19th back to him. We started information complaint and began searching for the vehicle, and received information 2 weeks later, I think on the 13th of October, that the vehicle had been seen back around the 1st. So the deputy located the vehicle, and the search was started on the 14th or 15th, I think, of October. in and around the area where the vehicle was located. That search continued for 4 days. Dog teams were utilized and ground searchers were utilized. With no success, and the search was ended on the 18th of October. And we went through the rest of the fall and hunting seasons hoping that maybe with all of the different traffic out there and the hunters that somebody would come across him, and they didn't. And then this past April, we received a call from a search and rescue person who indicated that they had picked him up in the same general area where the hunters had first saw him on the 19th of September, and given him a ride to the Sawtooth Berry Fields up on the 24 road, which would be about 8 miles east of where the search actually occurred, and dropped him off there. And so as far as we know at this point, that's the last time anybody had any contact with him. Would have been within a couple of days of the 19th of September.
There was no indication, he gave no indication of what his intentions were.
He did not, and in fact his behavior was still consistent with what the bow hunter had encountered when he talked to him on the 19th. So,
was there any indication of what his intentions were after they dropped him off at the berry fields?
No, and in fact, I know that the deputy's done an interview by phone with the person that gave him a ride, but I have not seen a written report yet on that. So that still needs to be followed up, and why he wanted to be dropped there. Although it did bring him closer to the regional rainbow gathering, it still was quite a distance away. So, but to my knowledge, there was no indication or no discussion about where he was going from there or why he wanted to be dropped off at that location.
And where was the regional rainbow gathering that year?
So last year it was up around Sleeping Beauty, which would have been north of Trout Lake, the town of Trout Lake, and probably like 6 to 8 miles, a little bit farther out of Trout Lake. And it was a small gathering. It was not chartered or recognized by the council, but they still held it, and I think it lasted a couple of weeks. There was probably 100 people there.
So he was there like probably a week in advance of that, or do you know?
He arrived on the Gifford Pin Show probably, a week or week and a half in advance of that gathering commencing.
Yeah, but his sleeping bag was back at the car. You guys?
Yeah, everything he owned was at the car. If he had anything with him, it was the clothes on his back. All of his belongings and everything was at the vehicle.
Wow. I have this theory that he was going to try to hike back on the PCT and then cut across to his camping site. Does that make any sense at all?
No, because the PCT would run the wrong direction. It ran south and he needed to go, kind of ran southwest and he needed to go north if he was going to take that route. And I don't think he had enough knowledge without a map with him to do that. So I don't think he could have navigated that without the assistance of a map. I don't believe he had one with him.
Interesting, but he probably wasn't trying to get across to the Rainbow Festival gathering without any of his belongings.
I can't see that happening. I mean, if he wanted to join that and spend a few days with that group, I would think he would drive there and take everything he owned. It's not normal for a person to leave everything you own and everything you have with you at your camp and your vehicle and just walk away. There's something certainly not right with that type of behavior, and it's certainly consistent with the way, again, that he was acting when people came across him.
One of the areas I want to check is the cliffs there at Sawtooth Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it seems like people around here will frequently end up at the bottom of a cliff.
We do have a lot of that. You know, certainly, I guess those types of things are possibilities. That's one of the things that we did a lot of focus on in the initial search on Rush Creek, because it's such a canyon, and we tried to get searchers down in the creek bed itself just to make sure that he didn't fall off the edge. But obviously we found out later that we'd spent 4 days searching an area that he actually wasn't in, because we received that information in April that he got in the ride out. Again, the Lone Butte Snow Park, and then the 30 road goes out to the berry fields. He turned down the 65 road, and then he took a skid road, and he was right about in here is where the car was. Now this road's washed out right here at the creek, so you can't drive any farther south. And when he was contacted by the hunters, it was down in this area here. So not too far from the snow park, kind of halfway between the intersection of the 65 and the snow park. So down in here.
Okay.
And then he got a ride within a day or two of that contact and went out the 30 road and was dropped off over here somewhere in the berry fields. This is the 24 road. And the Sawtooth berry fields are all up in here.
Okay.
This is Sawtooth Mountain.
Okay. Great.
And the PCT obviously runs right down through the middle of Indian Heaven Wilderness. So to get on the PCT, you know, if that's what he was going to do, and he'd have to cut back across here, or come clear down to Thomas Lake and cut across and go back up to 65.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've like this. I almost see him going up the peak here just to get the view, but. Yeah, and I'm thinking if he did cut across, that's just such a wide open space.
I mean, it's a good trail out through and past Placid Lake, and it puts you right back on this road, but he'd have had a 2-mile walk down the road, or coming out at Thomas Lake, he'd have had a 3-mile walk to get back.
I didn't realize there was actually a trail right here. Okay. Well, it gives me lots to think about. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
You bet.
That was a really interesting meeting with Sheriff Brown and Under Sheriff Bond. I just found a whole bunch of information that I didn't know. I thought it was really interesting that he was going to the Rainbow Festival, or the Rainbow Gathering, that's a regional meeting that's not sanctioned by the council, that happens every year in this area, and that he hadn't likely gone to the Rainbow Festival there the year before. But I also, well, just the details of his camp and what was there and wasn't there, and I think it still seems like he could be, like my original thought, that he was trying to get back to his camp, or would have been hiking back to his camp, was right spot on, because he didn't have a sleeping bag with him, or hardly any. Doesn't sound like he was carrying anything. So very interesting, and I really need to get back up there to those cliffs. Another thing that's interesting about the Rainbow Gathering is that he said, Sheriff Brown said, that it's happening this weekend, which I didn't realize. That just this regional small gathering, and I was planning on going up there this weekend, so I'm hoping I can find them and just talk with some folks and get a feel for the situation. Yeah, a lot to process now. I'm headed into Portland to REI to try to get some different rain pants for this weekend, and my water filter replaced as well, that I've been complaining about for so long.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. And I am headed there in about rush hour traffic, and I hate heading into the city, especially Portland, around rush hour. I have friends from LA who say Portland has worse traffic than LA. It's just bad. There are people who don't want to build new roads, and then There's other people on the Washington side that don't want light rail, more light rail, and so it's just, I do not like the rush hour traffic in that area. So regarding water filters, if you're hiking around Mount St. Helens, circumnavigating it, and you see a milky stream of white water, even if it's the only one that you've come across for a long time, don't filter your water there. It will ruin your filter. Words to live by. So I caught a big break tonight on the way home. I passed a group of Rainbow family, about 5 people, and I gave them a ride. I wanted to know the exact location of the Rainbow Gathering this year. The sheriff had given me some information about it, but I think this is a little bit more detailed. And when I was talking with Sheriff Brown, he mentioned, that it's possible Austin could be there. How probably unlikely, but if a person is trying to disappear, which some people do that in the very same way that Austin disappeared, that's what they'll do. So I want to go up there and just find out for a little bit more about the culture, see if anybody recognizes him or has seen him, seen Austin anywhere. That Austin is probably his road name or family name. It's actually his middle name, but Glenn is his real name, as I found out. And everyone at the road gathering or Rainbow Gathering has a road name or a family name. And so I'm curious what I'll find out. I'm also going to spend a few days looking for Austin, searching a grid. Not so much, well, kind of a grid under those cliffs up there at Sawtooth Mountain. So, interesting things developing. I don't know what they'll turn up. And anyhow, please like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe and share it with a friend. Or share it with a friend. Those things would really help me out. Thanks a lot. We'll see you again soon.